At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter stood up, lifted her wine glass, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We've talked. It's time you stop pretending like you're still part of this family." No warning, no lead up, just that. Cold and final. My son looked down at his plate. My granddaughter didn't even glance up from her phone. I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain white envelope. I laid it on the table, slowly, deliberately. "This is for all of you." They didn't touch it, not yet. But once they opened it, everything changed. Their smirks disappeared, their confidence shattered, and for the first time in a long while, I was the one in control. But before we get to that moment, let me take you back. My name is Ellen Brooks. I'm 67 years old. Until recently, I lived in the house my late husband Robert and I shared for 42 years. He passed away in early spring, peacefully in his sleep. That's what the doctor said. Peaceful. But grief is anything but peaceful. Robert was the kind of man who fixed everything. Broken chairs, leaky pipes, my mood on hard days. When he died, it wasn't just losing a person. It was like losing gravity. I floated for weeks, untethered. At the funeral, my kids were helpful. Claire, my daughter, managed the service. Her husband, Evan, handled logistics. Josh, my son, flew in from Arizona with his wife and kids. It almost felt like a family again, for 3 days. Then, just a week later, Claire sat me down at my kitchen table, the same one where she'd once done school projects and baked cookies with her dad. "Mom," she said gently, "you can't stay in this house. It's too big. Too much for you to handle on your own." Evan chimed in. "We found this great senior living place. It's really nice, modern, safe." I told them I wasn't ready, that I wanted to stay, but the brochures kept coming. The phone calls, the tours, the pressure. They meant well, I think. Or at least they thought they did. Eventually, I gave in. I sold the house. Our home. The place where Robert planted tulips every spring and danced with me in the living room on our anniversary. Where our kids took their first steps. Where the walls held 40 years of laughter, arguments, birthdays, and holidays. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in one of those active senior complexes. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige people, bingo on Thursdays, movie nights featuring films everyone had already seen 10 times. It wasn't bad. But it wasn't home. Claire helped me unpack. She looked around the tiny dining area and said, "Your china won't fit here, Mom. We'll keep it at our place. You can visit it, like it was a person in a nursing home." Still, I tried. I joined the book club, went to water aerobics, tried smiling at strangers in the elevator. Then came the phone call. "Mom," Claire said, voice tight, "Evan's commission check is late, and the mortgage is due tomorrow. Could you help us out this once? Just this once. How much?" $3,200. I transferred the money immediately. I had it. Between the house sale and Robert's pension, I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. And they were my kids. That was just the beginning. Over the next 4 months, there were more calls, more emergencies, car repairs, credit card debt, school fees for the kids, a last-minute vacation they'd already booked and couldn't cancel. I helped. Every time. Without hesitation. I even paid for a new washing machine and their HOA fees. I didn't ask questions. By November, I'd sent over $30,000. Then came the night that changed everything. Claire had left her tablet at my place after visiting with the kids. I picked it up to charge it, and the screen lit up with a photo. It was her and Evan, champagne in hand, smiling wide, at an expensive rooftop restaurant downtown. The caption? "Celebrating a record quarter. Work hard, play harder." My stomach dropped. The week before, she'd called in tears, saying they couldn't cover their electric bill. I started scrolling. New watches, spa trips, a weekend getaway. Evan holding keys to what looked like a brand new SUV, the kind with the sunroof and the touchscreen dashboard. It didn't make sense. Until it did. I sat there, in my beige apartment, surrounded by furniture that didn't fit, and memories that no longer had a place, and realized something very simple. They were using me. They weren't in trouble. They weren't struggling. They were comfortable, carefree, funded by their foolish, grieving mother. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name was Grant Delaney. Robert and I had worked with him for years. Smart, discreet, and, most importantly, patient. I told him everything. The house, the move, the money, the lies. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. Then he said, "Ellen, what you're describing is called financial exploitation. And it's more common than you think." I told him I didn't want revenge. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I just wanted to protect what little I had left. Grant nodded. "We can start by restructuring your accounts, change access, update your will, and if you'd like, we can make sure none of your assets end up in the wrong hands." It felt strange, cold even, but necessary. That weekend, I cooked for myself for the first time in months. Pot roast. Just like Robert used to love. I even used our old china. The set Claire said was too fancy for every day. While it simmered, I pulled out bank statements. I highlighted every transaction, every wire transfer, every Zelle payment, every Venmo note that said, "Thanks, Mom," with a heart emoji. I tallied it all up. $32,700. That's what it had cost me to learn that love without boundaries becomes debt. That Monday, I called Claire. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. Did you send the money for Emily's insurance yet? The payment's due today." I smiled into the phone. "No, sweetheart, I haven't. I've been thinking, maybe you and Evan should consider a budget counselor, someone to help you manage things better." Silence. Then, "Mom, we're just in a temporary rough patch." "It's been 4 months, Claire." "That's not temporary." Her tone changed, sharp. "So, you're saying you won't help us anymore?" "I'm saying you might need to find another solution that doesn't involve your widowed mother covering your bills." She hung up. No goodbye. No thank you. Just a click. And that was the moment I stopped being scared of losing them, because I realized I already had. After that phone call, I sat in the quiet of my beige apartment and waited. I expected Claire to call back, apologize, say she overreacted. She didn't. Days passed. No texts, no emails, just silence. But it wasn't peaceful. It was calculated. I knew that kind of silence. The kind that says, "You're being punished." What she didn't know was that I was already done playing the role of the obedient, convenient mother. I had already met with Grant, my lawyer, 3 times. We'd gone over every detail. The accounts, the beneficiaries, the trust Robert and I had set up years ago. The one I had quietly forgotten about until now. Turns out, I still had full control. And no one could touch it without my signature. Not Claire, not Josh, not anyone. Grant asked, "Do you want to remove them entirely?" I shook my head. Not yet. Instead, I asked him to draft a letter. Something short, clear, and airtight. No legal jargon, just facts. Something that would remind my children who they were dealing with. Something that would arrive with perfect timing. We printed 4 copies, one for each of them, sealed, no return address. I placed them in a drawer and waited. In the meantime, I started reclaiming my life. I painted one of the beige walls light blue. Just one. Management didn't approve. I didn't care. I bought new bed sheets, threw out the old tea-stained ones, started baking again. Not for anyone else, just for me. The first pie I made was apple. I brought half to a neighbor I barely knew, a retired teacher named Nora who lived down the hall. She invited me in for tea. We ended up talking for 4 hours. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. The next week, Josh called. "Hey, Mom." "Just checking in. Everything okay?" I hesitated. Josh had always been different from Claire. Less demanding, less dramatic. But he also hadn't offered to help with anything after Robert passed. He flew home, said all the right things at the funeral, then flew back and disappeared. I told him I was fine. Then, just before hanging up, he asked, "Claire mentioned you were upset." Something happened. So she'd been talking to him, probably twisting the story. I just realized it's time I stopped pretending everything's okay, I said. A pause. Right? Well, take care, Mom. And that was it. Then came Thanksgiving. Claire invited me, like nothing had happened. Texted me a long message about how family is still family and holidays should bring us together. She even said Emily missed me, the same Emily who hadn't called or visited in 3 months. I wasn't sure whether to go. I almost declined. But then I remembered the envelope in the drawer, and I realized this was the perfect time. When I arrived at Claire's house, everything looked perfect. The table was set like a magazine spread, candles, linen napkins, place cards. She'd made sure to seat me at the far end. Dinner began normally, small talk, tension, Claire smiling too much, Evan too quiet, Josh distracted. Then, just as dessert was being served, Claire stood up. I think it's time we talk about something, she said, glass in hand. Mom, we love you. But we've realized it's not healthy to keep pretending things are fine when they're not. Everyone froze. Josh looked at her, confused. Claire continued. You've changed. You've become distant, critical. And honestly, it's exhausting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was staging an intervention at Thanksgiving. For the sake of our family, she said, we think it's best if you take some space. From all of us. Josh said nothing. Evan stared at the table. Emily scrolled her phone. That's when I reached into my handbag. 4 envelopes, 1 for each of them. I slid them across the table, one by one. No words. What is this? Claire asked. Read it, I said. She opened hers first. Her face paled as she scanned the letter. Josh opened his, then Evan, then Emily. Silence. Total silence. No one moved. No one blinked. Claire finally looked up. You rewrote the trust? I nodded. Yes. But it's legal. Signed. Witnessed. Sealed. I don't understand, she said, voice shaking. I do, Josh muttered. He folded the paper and set it down. What does it mean? Emily asked, looking at her parents. Claire didn't answer, so I did. It means I've made other arrangements. Ones that don't include being manipulated? You think we used you? Claire snapped. I stared at her. You lied. You took money for bills while you were drinking champagne at rooftop restaurants. You let me sell my home while you treated me like a wallet with a heartbeat. We're your family. Exactly, I said. And you treated me worse than strangers. Evan finally spoke. This is over the top. You could have just talked to us. I tried. For months. You didn't listen. Now you will. The room stayed quiet. The only sound was the wind outside, rattling the windows. I stood. Thank you for dinner. The turkey was dry. And I left. The next morning, I expected a knock at the door. Or at least a phone call, but there was nothing. No apology, no explanation, no tantrum. Just more silence. That was fine by me. The envelope had done its job. Each letter had explained exactly what I'd done, removed them from the trust, canceled access to joint accounts, and redirected all future benefits to a new foundation I created. One that supports women over 60 who are starting over. I called it the Second Bloom Fund, named after the hydrangeas Robert planted every spring. He used to say they bloomed late, but always brighter. That's how I felt now. Late, maybe, but finally blooming. Grant helped set up the foundation paperwork. It was airtight, no loopholes. No way for anyone to challenge it without making fools of themselves in court. I transferred everything: savings, property shares, life insurance, pension reserves. Claire and Josh had been written out of my estate entirely, unless they wanted to dispute it publicly, which, knowing Claire, she'd never risk. She cared too much about her image. The next week, I went about my life. Coffee with Nora, book club on Wednesday, grocery runs, quiet dinners. Then, late Friday evening, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Josh standing there, hands in his pockets. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, same one Claire said was too old and small for company. "You really did it," he said. "Took us all out." I did. He nodded slowly like he'd been expecting it, maybe even respecting it. Why didn't you just talk to me first? He asked. I paused. I did, Josh. You just weren't listening. He winced. I poured tea, slid him a cup. He didn't touch it. You know Claire's furious, he said. She says you blindsided her? Claire is furious because she lost control, I replied. Josh finally looked me in the eye. She used the money. That's true. But not all of it was selfish. They were struggling for a while. Then she should have said so. Honestly, he didn't argue. He knew I was right. After a long silence, he said, She's planning to contest it. Legally. I smiled into my tea. She can try. Josh chuckled, not out of humor, but recognition. I forgot how stubborn you can be. I prefer the word prepared. He stood to leave. Before he reached the door, I said, Josh. He turned. You haven't asked me for money. Not once. Why? He hesitated. Because I figured if you wanted to help, you would. And if you didn't, I shouldn't ask. I nodded. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. That weekend, Claire sent me an email. Long, dramatic, and full of guilt-laced language. She didn't say sorry. She didn't ask how I was. She just wrote that I'd hurt the family and damaged trust that may never be rebuilt. She attached screenshots of Emily crying, and then ended with, Hope you're happy. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent her a single-sentence reply. I am. Then I closed the laptop and went back to my puzzle. I hadn't touched puzzles in years, but something about it, the slow logic, the satisfying clicks, felt healing. Piece by piece, I was rebuilding my life. One choice at a time. Then, 2 days later, the real storm hit. Emily showed up. She knocked, then knocked again, more aggressively. When I opened the door, she burst in without asking. She wore designer boots and a hoodie that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Grandma, what the hell? She snapped. I said nothing, just let her pace. You took away my college fund. You know that, right? It wasn't a college fund, I said calmly. It was a family trust. Well, I'm family. Are you? I asked. She stopped. You haven't visited in months. You didn't call when I moved. You didn't even send a thank you when I paid for your SAT prep. She flinched. That's not the point, she mumbled. I raised my eyebrows. Emily folded her arms, scowled. This isn't fair. Neither was lying to me or using me. I didn't do anything. You laughed at my apartment, I said. Remember? When you visited last spring, you called it sad grandma housing when you thought I was out of earshot. She looked down. People talk. That doesn't mean they don't care. Caring isn't about what you say. It's about what you do. Emily said nothing. Eventually she left. No hug, no goodbye. But I didn't feel guilty. For the first time, I felt like I was finally being honest, with them and with myself. A week passed, then another. December rolled in quietly. The apartment complex put up wreaths and lights. Nora invited me to her niece's holiday recital. We baked cookies together and delivered them to the staff. I felt lighter. Then Josh called again. Mom, he said slowly, Claire's filing. She's really doing it. I didn't ask what filing meant. I already knew. She wanted to challenge the trust, claim undue influence, emotional distress, misuse of authority. It wouldn't work. Grant had prepared for this. Everything was documented. Every payment, every message, every lie. Still, I felt a flicker of sadness. Not fear, not regret, just sadness. That it had come to this. That my own daughter would rather fight me than face the truth. Grant advised silence. Let them waste their money, he said. They'll lose. But let them learn the hard way. They stood at my door like strangers. Claire, stiff and polished, wearing a coat she clearly didn't expect to take off. Josh, behind her, hands deep in his pockets, eyes tired. I didn't invite them in right away. I waited. Claire broke the silence. We just want to talk. I stepped aside, and they walked in. Claire glanced around like it was her first time in the apartment. like she hadn't helped pick out half the furniture back when she was still pretending to care. Josh sat down. Claire remained standing, arms crossed. "I want to make something clear," she said. "This legal mess wasn't my idea." Evan pushed for it. He said we had to protect our rights. I raised an eyebrow. "Your rights?" She ignored the question. "Anyway, I called it off." Josh looked up, surprised. Apparently this was news to him. "You did?" he asked. Claire nodded. "There's no lawsuit. No contest. I told the lawyer to drop it. I said nothing." "Mom," she continued, her voice quieter now, "I know I messed up. I let things get out of hand. I said things I shouldn't have. Took more than I should have. I waited, still silent. But you blindsided us." Now there it was. The truth behind her visit. She wasn't here to make peace. She was here for control. "I thought you were slipping," she said, "after Dad died. You were so off. I thought I was helping. You thought removing me from my own home and draining my savings was helping?" Claire looked away. Josh stood. "I'm going to wait in the car," he said quietly. "I told you this wasn't a good idea." He left. Claire didn't. She looked down at the table, at the chipped teacup I'd been using all morning. "You really cut us off." "Yes," I said. Her lips trembled. "What am I supposed to tell Emily?" I stared at her. That choices have consequences. She's just a kid. "She's 17, I said. "Old enough to know better. Old enough to understand respect." Claire sank into the chair across from me, for the first time not performing. "I wasn't always like this," she whispered. "No," I agreed. "You weren't?" She looked up. "You remember when Dad had that surgery?" "The second one?" I nodded. "You didn't sleep for 3 nights. I saw you sitting by his bed, reading those old gardening magazines out loud." I remembered. Claire's voice softened. "You made it all look easy. Being strong, being good. I waited. I guess I thought you'd always be that way. No matter what we did." There it was, the quiet truth. They thought I was endless, forgiving, disposable. "I'm not a bottomless well, Claire," I said. "I can dry up too." We sat in silence for a long time. Then she stood. "I'm not here to ask for anything." I didn't believe her. "But if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to talk..." She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't stop her when she left. Josh came back the next day, alone. He brought groceries. Actual groceries, not just flowers and politeness. "Claire told me what happened," he said. "I didn't know she called off the filing." "I'm glad," I said. He helped me put the bags away, asked if I needed help changing the light bulbs in the hallway, then asked if I wanted to take a walk. We walked down the path behind the complex. Trees lined both sides. Dry leaves crunched underfoot. It was quiet. "Do you remember when Dad took me to the lake every summer?" Josh asked. "Of course." "You always stayed back, packed us sandwiches, gave me those notes with cheesy jokes." "I still have the notebook," I said. "The one with all the jokes." He smiled. "I thought about that after Thanksgiving. How I used to believe you had answers to everything, and how I stopped listening when I grew up." "That's common," I said. "Most kids grow out of admiration." "It's the ones who come back to it that surprise you." He nodded. "I'm sorry, Mom, for not asking how you were, for not helping more, for letting Claire take the lead." "That's not an apology you owe me," I said. "That's something you owe yourself." He blinked like he hadn't expected that. Back at the apartment, he lingered at the door. "If I ever needed help, with the boys or with things at home, could I come to you?" "You don't need a trust fund for that," I said. "You just need to show up." He nodded. Then he left. That night I made soup. Nothing fancy, just something warm. I didn't eat it all. I packed the rest in a container and left it outside Nora's door. The next morning she texted, "You make better soup than the dining hall." Fact. It made me smile. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hi," the voice said. "Is this Ellen Brooks?" "Yes." "This is Margaret Alvarez." "I manage the Willow Creek shelter. I just wanted to say thank you for your donation. She sounded confused, grateful but surprised. I didn't do it for thanks, I said. Well, whoever you did it for, it's going to help a lot of women. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. There's one in particular, she continued. Her name is Charlene. 62. Left a long-term situation. Had nothing. We're putting her in one of the transitional rooms with your help. I'm glad, I said. Margaret paused. She said she hadn't slept in a real bed in 3 years. That hit me harder than anything Claire had said, because I'd given away tens of thousands to people who had everything, and this woman, this stranger, cried over a mattress and clean sheets. December continued quietly. Claire didn't call again. Josh texted twice, short messages, thinking of you, and hope you're staying warm. I responded politely. No walls, no bridges, just boundaries. Nora and I went to the shelter one Saturday afternoon. She brought old coats, I brought books. We didn't plan to stay long, but once we arrived, time disappeared. Charlene wasn't there. She had found a job and moved into temporary housing. But her story wasn't the only one. I met Nancy, 64, who left a controlling situation after 30 years. Lorna, 70, who had been living in her car after her daughter evicted her. And Renee, 59, who smiled like someone who'd finally remembered what sunlight felt like. They offered me tea, the cheap kind in styrofoam cups. It tasted better than any cup I'd had in months. These women, they weren't broken, just bruised and stubborn, and full of stories they weren't sure anyone wanted to hear. But I listened. And for the first time since Robert passed, I felt useful again. After that visit, I made it a routine. Twice a week I came by. I brought puzzles, scarves I crocheted, old photo frames for their rooms. Nothing expensive, just presents. The director, Margaret, pulled me aside one day. You've given us more than money, she said. You've given time. That's the rare gift. I nodded, because I understood what she meant. Money helps. But it doesn't heal. Time, consistency, those rebuild people. Back home, I started sorting through old boxes, not just to downsize, but to really look at what I had kept and why. I found letters from Robert, grocery lists in his handwriting, notes he'd slipped into my coat pocket during hard weeks. You're not invisible. I see you. I cried over that one, not because I was sad, but because I hadn't let anyone see me in a long time. Then, right before Christmas, I got a card in the mail from Emily. No note. Just a printed holiday card with a smiling family photo, Claire, Evan, and Emily, posed in front of a fireplace that wasn't theirs. I recognized the background. It was a set from a photo studio in town. The message was simple. Wishing you warmth and joy this season. The Caldwell family. No love, no grandma, no signature in her handwriting, just sterile, curated distance. I placed it in the bin. The next day, I received another envelope, this one from the attorney's office that had helped me set up the trust. Inside was a handwritten note from Grant. Just a heads up. Claire requested a copy of the old trust for sentimental review. We did not send it. I thought you'd want to know. I stared at the note for a long time. She wasn't done after all. She was trying another angle. I didn't get angry. I didn't panic. I simply called Grant. I want to take it a step further, I said. Define step, he replied. I want it all transferred out of my name now. Before anything happens, before they can try again. He paused. You're sure? Yes. Okay, he said. Then we'll make it official. By New Year's Eve, the paperwork was finalized. The apartment I lived in was secured under a private senior fund. The rest, stocks, life insurance, savings, all rerouted to the Second Bloom Foundation. I left enough for myself, more than enough, but everything else now lived outside their reach. Claire couldn't contest what I didn't legally own, and I felt lighter. New Year's came. Nora and I watched fireworks from her window. We drank cheap cider and laughed over nothing, and just after midnight I made a single resolution. No more asking to be included. No more shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. No more hoping for scraps of affection. The next week, Margaret from the shelter called. We're opening another unit, she said, excited. It'll house 6 more women. That's wonderful, I said. It's because of you. No, I replied. It's because of them. They just needed someone to remember they mattered. She paused. Do you want to name the building? I blinked. What? You funded most of it. We usually give naming rights for major donors. It's optional, but... I cut her off. Call it the Hydrangea House. She laughed. Any reason? It blooms late, I said, but it always blooms. She liked that. So did I. 2 days later, Josh called again. This time his voice was different, worried. Claire's not doing well, he said. What happened? They're selling the house. She and Evan. It's not good. She's blaming you. I didn't say anything. I'm not calling to ask for money, he added. I'm just warning you. I think she's going to try something. Maybe media, maybe public pressure. She's angry. Then let her be angry, I said. I don't want to lose both of you, he said quietly. Then don't stand in the middle, I said. Pick a side. Or build your own, he sighed. I just miss when we were normal. We never were, I said. You just didn't notice. The call ended. I sat on the couch, wrapped in the quilt Robert used to nap under. It started with a message from a reporter. Nothing flashy. Just a polite email asking if I'd like to comment on a family dispute that's recently entered public record. I didn't reply. Then came a second message, this time from a blog Claire followed, one of those lifestyle sites that posts curated stories about modern motherhood, wellness, and personal finance. The headline? When Parents Withhold Inheritance, How Elderly Control Damages Generational Wealth. No names, no direct quotes. But the subtext was clear. Claire was painting herself as a victim. An only daughter abandoned by her grieving, unstable mother. The article described a widowed matriarch who manipulated her estate in secrecy, causing harmful division within an otherwise close family. It quoted anonymous sources, which I knew were Claire's friends, calling it a cautionary tale of what happens when aging parents feel threatened by their children's success. I read it once, then deleted it. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them wonder if I'd reply. I wouldn't. Because I'd already said everything I needed to, with the envelope, with the silence, with the choices I made and didn't explain. That was power. That was peace. The article didn't go viral. It didn't spark outrage. The world kept spinning. But within our town, the whispers began. Nora heard it first. At the pharmacy, 2 women chatting near the greeting cards. I heard her daughter's been shut out of the will. Serves her right. Didn't she put her in one of those tiny units? Shameful. Nora relayed it to me with a grin. You're the most talked about woman in aisle 7, she said. We laughed over it. A week later, I got a handwritten letter. Real ink, real effort. From Emily. Dear Grandma, I've been thinking a lot about Thanksgiving. And the things I didn't say. I was angry that day. But mostly because I felt embarrassed. Not about you, about myself, about how I acted. You didn't deserve that. I don't expect anything. I just hope one day we can have tea again, even if it's not the same, even if we never talk about what happened. Love, M. It wasn't much, but it was something. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where I kept Robert's notes. Maybe, I thought, she'll find her way back to who she used to be, and maybe I'll be ready if she does. Meanwhile, Hydrangea House opened its doors. 6 women moved in. The local news came. Margaret asked if I wanted to be interviewed. I declined. Let the spotlight stay on them. They deserved it. I showed up quietly, brought a cake, sat in the back while Nancy gave a speech. I thought I was too old to start over, she said. Turns out I just needed a door to open. She didn't know it, but I cried quietly behind my coffee cup, because I knew exactly what she meant. That night, Nora and I walked home in the dark. The stars were bright, the cold sharp. She linked her arm through mine. You ever think you'd be a rule breaker at this age? I smiled. Turns out I was just late to it. In January, Josh invited me to dinner. Just him and the boys. They cooked spaghetti, burned the garlic bread. It was perfect. The boys told me about school, video games, a class pet they were both terrified of but refused to admit it. When they left the table, Josh poured more tea and sat quietly. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. "I always was," I replied. "You just never had to notice before." He nodded. "I'm trying, Mom." I know, and I believed him. A few weeks later, I visited the graveyard. Robert's headstone was clean, simple. I brought fresh flowers, sat in silence. "I think you'd be proud," I said. I didn't let them wear me down. The wind moved gently through the trees. I took that as agreement. Then I stood and walked home. Back at the apartment, I checked the mailbox. Inside was another envelope. This one from a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet. A formal withdrawal of any legal claim to my estate, signed by Claire Caldwell.